Congratulations. You've just woken up 50,000 years ago. The good news? You're still breathing. The bad news? Everything else. Your eyes flutter open in what can only be described as humanity's most successful nightmare. There's no gentle sunrise streaming through curtains because, well, there are no curtains. There's no cozy bedroom because bedrooms haven't been invented yet. Hell, even the concept of indoors is still a few dozen millennia away from being figured out. Instead, you're lying on a bed of animal skins that haven't been washed since. Ever. The furs beneath you are stiff with accumulated sweat, blood, and bodily fluids from countless nights of restless sleep. They crackle when you move, not from freshness, but from the buildup of organic matter that's slowly composting beneath your body. The smell hits you like a physical blow, a cocktail of rancid fat, smoke, human musk, and something that might charitably be called eau de mammoth dung. Welcome to the Stone Age, where hygiene isn't just poor. It's a concept that won't be invented for another 40,000 years. You try to stretch, but your joints protest with the enthusiasm of a rusty gate. At 25 years old, you're practically elderly by Stone Age standards. Your spine feels like it's held together with hope and stubbornness, because that's essentially what it is. There are no chiropractors here, no massage therapists, no one who understands that the human back wasn't designed to sleep on rocks and chase megafauna across frozen tundra. Your hair, oh, your glorious, unwashed hair, hangs in greasy ropes around your face. It's been months since it encountered anything resembling cleaning, unless you count that time you got caught in a rainstorm and stood there with your mouth open, desperately trying to catch enough water to swallow. Your scalp itches with the familiar sensation of tiny legs marching across your skin. Lots of them. They're not just residents of your head. They're founding members of a thriving community that includes fleas, mites, and other creatures whose names won't be discovered until the invention of microscopes. But here's the thing that would blow your modern mind. This isn't rock bottom. This is normal. This is how humans lived for the vast majority of our species' existence. Everything you consider basic human dignity, regular baths, clean clothes, brushed teeth, privacy when relieving yourself, didn't exist for 999% of human history. The Hollywood version of Stone Age life is a romantic fantasy. You've seen the movies, ruggedly handsome cavemen with perfect teeth and mysteriously clean animal skins, living in picturesque caves with convenient furniture made from mammoth bones. The women have perfectly styled hair that somehow defies the laws of physics and hygiene, while everyone maintains that healthy glow that comes from, what exactly? Prehistoric skincare routines. The reality is far more brutal and infinitely more fascinating. Archaeological evidence tells us a different story. When researchers examine the remains of our Stone Age ancestors, they find bodies that tell tales of constant struggle against the very basics of staying alive. Teeth worn down to nubs from chewing gritty food, bones that show evidence of countless infections, skulls that reveal lives cut tragically short by what we'd consider minor problems today. But they also find something remarkable, evidence of care, creativity, and surprising sophistication in dealing with the challenges of staying cleanish in a world determined to make you filthy. Take dental care, for instance. You might assume that Stone Age people had terrible teeth, and in some ways, you'd be right. But here's the plot twist. They actually had better oral health than many people after the invention of agriculture. Their diet of tough, fibrous foods naturally cleaned their teeth as they chewed. Without sugar, refined carbohydrates, and processed foods, cavities were actually relatively rare. When they did develop dental problems, archaeological evidence shows they weren't helpless. In 2015, researchers discovered evidence of dental surgery performed 14,000 years ago. Someone had carefully manipulated a cavity using stone tools. That's not just impressive, it's mind-blowing. Or consider clothing. The popular image of barely dressed cavemen is nonsense. Genetic evidence from clothing lice suggests humans have been wearing clothes for at least 170,000 years. They developed sophisticated techniques for processing animal hides, creating surprisingly complex garments with stone tools, bone needles, and plant fibers. The problem wasn't making clothes, it was keeping them clean. Imagine wearing the same outfit every day for months or years. Not by choice, but because it's the only outfit you have. No washing machines, no soapy, no dry cleaners. Just you, your increasingly aromatic animal skins, and a growing ecosystem of insects who've decided your clothing is prime real estate. The Romans later had a saying, "The clothes make the man." In the Stone Age, the clothes definitely made the man smell. Personal hygiene, as we understand, it simply didn't exist. There were no morning routines, no evening rituals, no weekly bath schedules. Staying clean wasn't a priority because staying alive was a full-time job. When you're spending every waking moment hunting mammoths, gathering berries, avoiding predators, and trying not to freeze to death, worrying about body odor seems like a luxury. Yet somehow, against all odds, these incredibly unhygienic humans not only survived, they thrived. They created art that still moves us today. They developed complex social structures. They spread across the globe, adapting to environments from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests. They became us. The journey from Stone Age stench to modern sanitation is one of the most remarkable transformations in human history. It's a story of ingenuity, adaptation, and the gradual realization that maybe, just maybe, not smelling like a rotting mammoth carcass might have some advantages. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Right now, in your Stone Age awakening, you need to face the day ahead. You need to find food, avoid becoming food, and try not to die from the 1,001 things that are actively trying to kill you. Personal hygiene, that's a problem for future humans who have solved the more pressing issues of basic survival. So take a deep breath if you can stand the smell, and prepare for a journey through the most unhygienic period in human history. You're about to discover how our ancestors lived, loved, and somehow managed to reproduce despite being absolutely, utterly, magnificently filthy. You'll learn about dental surgery performed with stone knives, clothing that doubled as insect habitats, and food preparation methods that would violate every health code ever written. You'll discover how humans managed waste disposal when away meant wherever you happen to be standing, and why our ancestors' approach to bathing can best be described as optional at best, catastrophic at worst. This isn't a story about how far we've come, though we certainly have. It's a story about human resilience, creativity, and the surprising ways our ancestors solved problems we can barely imagine. It's about understanding that hygiene isn't just about being clean. It's about survival, social structure, and what it means to be human. So welcome to the Stone Age, where everyone smells terrible. Dental floss is made from animal sinew, and your morning routine consists of checking whether anything tried to eat you during the night. Trust us, you're going to want to take notes, and maybe invest in some hand sanitizer for afterward. 2. Morning breath, dental care in the Stone Age. Picture this. You roll over on your fur-covered pile of rocks, and your new Stone Age partner leans in for what modern humans might optimistically call a good morning kiss. But the moment their mouth opens to speak, you're hit with a blast of breath so potent it could knock a woolly rhinoceros unconscious at 50 paces. This isn't romance. This is biological warfare. Welcome to dental hygiene in the Stone Age, where morning breath wasn't just unpleasant. It was a legitimate survival threat. But here's the twist that'll blow your mind. Despite having oral care routines that would horrify any modern dentist, our Stone Age ancestors actually had better teeth than most people who came after them. Let's start with the obvious question. What did Stone Age teeth actually look like? If you're imagining rotting, black stumps barely hanging on and swollen, infected gums, you're both right and completely wrong. Archaeological evidence tells us a fascinating story that challenges everything we think we know about prehistoric dental health. The average Stone Age mouth was a study in contradictions. On one hand, teeth were worn down like ancient millstones from a lifetime of chewing incredibly tough food. Imagine trying to eat jerky that's been sitting in the sun for 3 months, mixed with gritty particles of dirt and stone. Every meal was like putting your teeth through a medieval torture device. By age 30, If you were lucky enough to live that long, your molars might be worn down to the gum line. But here's where it gets interesting. Cavities were actually rare. While medieval peasants and modern sugar addicts develop holes in their teeth faster than termites in a wooden house, Stone Age people had remarkably few cavities. Why? Because their diet was doing something our modern processed foods can't. It was actually cleaning their teeth as they ate. Think about it. When you're gnawing on tough, fibrous roots, stringy raw meat, and hard nuts, you're essentially giving your teeth a workout and a cleaning at the same time. The rough texture scrubs away plaque. The intense chewing stimulates saliva production. And the lack of refined sugars means the bacteria in your mouth don't have the fuel they need to produce tooth-destroying acids. Dr. Christina Warner, an expert in ancient oral microbiomes, discovered something remarkable when she analyzed the dental plaque of Stone Age skeletons. The bacterial communities in prehistoric mouths were completely different from ours. They were more diverse, more balanced, and significantly less likely to cause the kinds of problems that send modern humans running to the dentist. But don't get too excited about Stone Age dental superiority. When things went wrong, and they often did, they went spectacularly wrong. Imagine developing a toothache in an era before aspirin, before Novocaine, before the concept of sterile medical instruments. Your options were essentially three. Suffer in silence, have someone knock the tooth out with a rock, or try some form of primitive dental surgery with tools that made medieval torture devices look sophisticated. And yet, archaeologists have found evidence that Stone Age people did exactly that. In 2015, researchers studying a 14,000-year-old skeleton from northern Italy made a discovery that rewrote our understanding of prehistoric medicine. The skeleton, known as Villebrino 1, had clear evidence of dental intervention. Someone had deliberately manipulated a large cavity in a molar using stone tools, scraping and levering at the damaged tooth in what appears to be an early form of dental surgery. This wasn't a one-off incident. Similar evidence has been found at sites across Europe and the Middle East, suggesting that Stone Age dental procedures were more common than anyone previously imagined. The tools were crude: sharp flint knives, bone picks, and stone scrapers. But the intent was sophisticated. These weren't random acts of desperation. They were calculated medical interventions. Of course, the patient experience was probably less than ideal. There was no anesthesia unless you count a good blow to the head, or perhaps some fermented fruit. The dental office was wherever you happened to be when the pain became unbearable, possibly a cave, more likely just out in the open where your screams wouldn't echo quite so dramatically. The actual procedure would have been nightmarish by modern standards. Archaeological evidence suggests the practitioner would use sharp stone tools to scrape away infected tissue, sometimes enlarging the cavity to remove damaged material. In some cases, they filled the holes with plant material or animal fat. Not exactly FDA approved, but surprisingly effective at reducing pain and preventing further infection. Some researchers believe they even used a form of primitive anesthesia. Various plants contain natural painkillers, and there's evidence that Stone Age people had sophisticated knowledge of medicinal plants. Birch polypore, a fungus found with Otzi the Iceman, has analgesic properties. Willow bark contains salicin, a compound similar to aspirin. Whether they used these specifically for dental procedures is speculation, but given their apparent knowledge of plant medicine, it's entirely possible. The most remarkable thing about Stone Age dentistry isn't the sophistication of the procedures. It's the fact that patients survived them. Without antibiotics, antiseptics, or even basic understanding of infection control, any dental surgery was essentially a race between healing and sepsis. The fact that we find healed evidence of these procedures suggests that success rates were higher than you might expect. But let's talk about daily oral hygiene, or the complete lack thereof. There were no toothbrushes, no toothpaste, no mouthwash, no dental floss. The closest thing to a toothpick was a sharp stick or a thin bone, and these are more likely used for getting chunks of meat unstuck than for any systematic plaque removal. Instead of our modern morning routine of brushing, flossing, and rinsing, Stone Age people had what can charitably be called a natural approach to oral care. They might chew on fibrous plant material that acted like a primitive toothbrush. Some cultures used twigs from specific trees. The ends would fray when chewed, creating a brush-like texture that could remove some plaque and food particles. Archaeological evidence from dental calculus, that's fossilized plaque for those keeping track, shows that Stone Age people were eating a remarkably diverse diet of plants, many of which had natural antibacterial properties. Wild garlic, for instance, doesn't just make your breath interesting. It actually kills harmful bacteria in your mouth. The same goes for various herbs and roots that were regular parts of the prehistoric diet. But here's where things get really gross. Tooth cleaning often involved methods that would make a modern germaphobe faint. Some evidence suggests people used small sticks to pick their teeth, then shared these sticks with family members. Imagine passing around a used toothpick like a peace pipe, each person adding their own contribution to the bacterial culture growing on the wood. Gum disease was rampant, but not necessarily for the reasons you'd expect. While poor cleaning certainly played a role, the bigger problem was diet-related wear and tear. Constantly chewing tough, gritty food didn't just wear down teeth, it also damaged gums. Combined with the inevitable cuts and scrapes from sharp bone fragments in food, Stone Age gums were essentially open wounds in a bacteria-rich environment. The breath situation was, to put it mildly, apocalyptic. Without any form of systematic oral hygiene, Stone Age mouths were bacterial zoos. The smell would have been overwhelming, a combination of rotting food particles, infected gums, and the kind of morning breath that develops when you haven't cleaned your teeth in, well, ever. Yet somehow, people still managed to reproduce. Either Stone Age humans had completely different standards of attractiveness, or love really is blind, and in this case, probably had a completely defunct sense of smell. The social implications of poor oral hygiene extended beyond romance. Bad breath and visible dental problems likely served as indicators of health and status. Someone with relatively healthy teeth and tolerable breath might have been seen as a better mate, a more effective hunter, or simply someone whose body was better at fighting off the constant assault of prehistoric life. Interestingly, dental problems might have driven some of the earliest innovations in food preparation. Evidence suggests that Stone Age people developed increasingly sophisticated cooking techniques partly to make food easier to chew. Pounding meat with stones, slow-cooking tough roots, and fermenting foods all serve to reduce the mechanical stress on teeth. The irony is that our ancestors' terrible oral hygiene might have actually helped them in some ways. The diverse bacterial communities in their mouths were probably more resistant to harmful pathogens than our modern, sanitized oral microbiomes. When everyone's breath smells terrible, no one's breath smells terrible. It's all relative. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Stone Age dental care is what it tells us about human determination. Despite having no understanding of bacteria, infection, or modern dental science, our ancestors developed surprisingly effective techniques for dealing with dental problems. They performed surgery with stone tools, identified and used natural painkillers, and somehow survived procedures that would terrify modern patients even with the benefit of anesthesia and antibiotics. So the next time you're dreading a trip to the dentist, remember your Stone Age ancestors. They faced tooth pain with nothing but sharp rocks and determination. They developed cavities and kept hunting mammoths. They performed surgery on each other with stone knives and somehow lived to tell about it. Your routine cleaning and maybe a small filling are looking pretty luxurious right about now, aren't they? 3. Bath time. Not water and washing. Let's address the elephant in the cave. When was the last time you had a bath? If you're living in the Stone Age, the answer is probably never, and we don't mean not this week or not this month, we mean never. As in, the concept of deliberately immersing your entire body in water for the purpose of getting clean is so foreign to your Stone Age brain that you might as well be trying to explain quantum physics to a confused mammoth. Welcome to an era where bath time meant accidentally falling into a river while trying to catch fish, and even then, your first instinct wasn't how refreshing, but sweet ancestors, I'm going to die of hypothermia. The modern human obsession with cleanliness would have seemed absolutely insane to your Stone Age ancestors. You spend roughly 45 minutes every day in various water-related hygiene activities: showering, washing your hands, brushing your teeth, washing your face. That's more time than a Stone Age person spent thinking about water for cleaning purposes in an entire year. Here's the brutal reality. For the vast majority of human existence, deliberate bathing simply didn't happen. Archaeological evidence suggests that regular, intentional bathing didn't become a thing until the Neolithic period, around 8,000 years ago. And even then, it was about as common as finding a decent cappuccino. Technically possible, but you'd be searching for a very long time. The reasons were both practical and cultural, but mostly practical in that this could literally kill you sense. First, let's talk about water availability. In the modern world, clean water flows magically from taps whenever you want it. In the Stone Age, water was a precious commodity that you quite literally couldn't live without. Every drop had to be found, collected, and carefully preserved. The idea of using large quantities of this life-sustaining liquid to splash around and remove perfectly natural body odor would have seemed like elaborate suicide. Stone Age people did encounter water regularly: rivers, streams, lakes, and the occasional natural hot spring. But their relationship with these water sources was complicated. Water meant survival, but it also meant danger. Rivers could sweep you away. Lakes might contain predators. Even shallow streams could become death traps if you slipped on wet rocks and injured yourself far from help. When Stone Age people did interact with water, it was almost always for drinking, cooking, or necessity rather than cleanliness. They might wade into a stream to catch fish or kneel by a river to fill their water containers. But the idea of stripping down and deliberately soaking their entire body, that was about as likely as them starting a book club. But let's say, hypothetically, that a Stone Age person decided to attempt what we'd recognize as bathing. The logistics alone were nightmarish. Step 1. Find a suitable body of water. This might involve traveling several miles, depending on the season and location. Step 2. Make sure the water won't kill you. Is it flowing or stagnant? Are there predators lurking nearby? Will the temperature cause immediate hypothermia? Step 3. Somehow heat the water, because jumping into an ice-cold river is an excellent way to go into shock and drown. Heating water was a monumental undertaking. There were no kettles, no pots, no convenient containers that could withstand direct flame. Instead, they had to use a technique called stone boiling, heating rocks in a fire until they were red hot, then carefully transferring these scalding stones into water-filled containers made from animal stomachs or tightly woven baskets. One wrong move, and you'd either burn yourself horribly or puncture your water container, leaving you with nothing but soggy ashes and third-degree burns. Even if you successfully heated the water, you then had to find a way to bathe without losing all that precious heat to the environment. There were no insulated bathrooms, no warm towels, no heated floors. You'd be washing yourself in the open air, probably during the brief window when temperatures rose above death by exposure, hoping that no predators, enemies, or curious family members decided to interrupt your vulnerable moment. The whole process would have taken hours, consumed enormous amounts of fuel and labor, and left you exhausted, cold, and probably dirtier than when you started. Is it any wonder that most Stone Age people took one look at this proposition and decided that smelling like a combination of mammoth hide and wood smoke was perfectly acceptable? Instead of bathing, Stone Age people developed alternative cleaning methods that range from surprisingly effective to, dear gods, what were they thinking? Sand was a popular choice for scrubbing. Coarse, abrasive sand could remove dead skin, embedded dirt, and some of the more offensive accumulations of grime. The technique was simple. Find some sand, rub it vigorously against your skin until you'd essentially given yourself a full-body dermabrasion. Then brush off the resulting mixture of sand, skin cells, and whatever horrifying substances have been living on your body. The results were mixed. On the positive side, sand could remove surface dirt and dead skin quite effectively. On the negative side, it also removed live skin, often leaving people looking like they'd been attacked by a very methodical but not particularly bright predator. Still, for special occasions, like trying to impress a potential mate or preparing for important social gatherings, the sand scrub was considered the height of personal grooming. Ash was another popular cleaning agent. Wood ash, specifically, contains potassium hydroxide, which is mildly alkaline and can help break down oils and organic material. Stone Age people figured this out through trial and error, though they probably thought of it more as this gray powder makes the smell go away rather than understanding the underlying chemistry. The ash treatment involved rubbing wood ash into the skin, letting it sit for a while to do its chemical magic, then scraping it off with flat stones or bone scrapers. This was surprisingly effective at removing oils and some odors, though it left people with a distinctly gray pallor that probably wasn't winning any beauty contests. Animal fats and oils were used for a different kind of cleaning, not removing dirt so much as masking it under a layer of hopefully less offensive substances. Bear fat, fish oil, and render mammoth blubber were all popular choices for this kind of protective coating. The theory was sound. If you can't remove the smell, overwhelm it with a different smell. The practice was less appealing. Imagine covering yourself in rancid fish oil, then going about your daily activities. You might smell like a seafood restaurant's dumpster, but at least you wouldn't smell like whatever had been growing on your unwashed body for the past 6 months. It was an upgrade, technically speaking. Some Stone Age people took this concept even further, mixing animal fats with crushed plants, berries, or other aromatic substances to create primitive perfumes. These weren't exactly Chanel No. 5, but they represented early experiments in making humans smell like something other than humans. The social implications of Stone Age bathing habits were enormous. Since everyone smelled equally terrible, body odor wasn't necessarily a social barrier. In fact, natural human scent probably served important functions, helping people identify family members, indicating health status, and providing information about diet and sexual readiness. But this doesn't mean Stone Age people were completely indifferent to cleanliness. Archaeological evidence suggests they had standards, they were just completely different from ours. Removing visible dirt from hands and face might have been common, especially before eating or social activities. Cleaning wounds was obviously important for survival, and there's evidence that people paid attention to the cleanliness of their tools, weapons, and food preparation areas. The rare occasions when Stone Age people did encounter hot water were probably transformative experiences. Natural hot springs where they existed might have been the closest thing to actual bathing that most people ever experienced. Archaeological sites near hot springs often show evidence of extended human occupation, suggesting these locations were highly valued. Imagine stumbling across a natural hot spring for the first time. The steam rising from heated water, the possibility of warmth without the constant struggle of maintaining a fire, the sheer luxury of immersing your aching, dirty body in hot water. It would have seemed like magic, which it probably was, to people with no understanding of geothermal activity. These hot spring experiences might have been the inspiration for later, more deliberate bathing practices. If soaking in hot water felt this good and seemed to have beneficial effects, maybe there was something to this whole getting clean concept after all. But for the vast majority of Stone Age people, hot springs were about as accessible as space travel. They made do with their sand scrubs, ash treatments, and aromatic animal fat rubs, all while maintaining the kind of personal hygiene standards that would get you banned from most modern public spaces. The gender dynamics of Stone Age hygiene were probably interesting, though we can only speculate based on limited evidence. Women might have paid more attention to cleanliness during menstruation, both for comfort and for practical reasons related to hunting and avoiding predators attracted to blood. Men who were active hunters might have been more concerned with removing scents that could alert prey to their presence. Children probably learned hygiene habits, such as they were, through observation and imitation. Picture a Stone Age mother teaching her daughter the fine art of the sand scrub, or a father showing his son how to properly apply rancid bear fat for maximum odor coverage. These weren't exactly the hygiene lessons we give our children today, but they represented the accumulated wisdom of thousands of generations. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about Stone Age bathing habits is how quickly they changed once circumstances allowed. As soon as humans developed better containers, more reliable heat sources, and more stable living situations, bathing became more common. The transition from never to occasionally to regularly happened relatively quickly in historical terms, suggesting that the desire for cleanliness was always there. It just took a while for the technology to catch up. So the next time you're enjoying a hot shower, take a moment to appreciate the miracle of modern plumbing. You're experiencing something that would have seemed impossibly luxurious to 99% of all humans who ever lived. You're cleaner after 5 minutes in your bathroom than your Stone Age ancestors ever were in their entire lives. And yes, that includes their wedding day. 4. Fashionably filthy. Clothing and its permanent residence. Let's talk about your wardrobe. And by wardrobe, we mean that single, increasingly questionable outfit you've been wearing for the past 18 months. That's right, 18 months. The same animal hide tunic. The same fur-lined boots that have molded themselves to the exact shape of your feet, complete with permanent imprints of your toe fungus. The same leather belt that's now more of a biological ecosystem than an accessory. Welcome to Stone Age fashion, where the concept of changing clothes is about as foreign as ordering takeout pizza. In the modern world, you probably own more clothing than a Stone Age person saw in their entire lifetime. Your closet contains dozens of shirts, multiple pairs of pants, specialized outfits for different occasions, and more underwear than our ancestors had total garments. You change clothes daily, wash them regularly, and replace them when they show signs of wear. Your Stone Age ancestor had one outfit. One, when it wore out, disintegrated, or became so thoroughly colonized by insects that it achieved sentience, they made a new one. This process took weeks or months of work. So most people try to make their clothing last as long as humanly possible. And by as long as humanly possible, we mean until it literally fell apart while they were wearing it. But here's what's truly remarkable. Despite having access to only the most basic materials and tools, Stone Age people created surprisingly sophisticated clothing. Genetic evidence from clothing lice tells us humans have been wearing clothes for at least 170,000 years. That's not just impressive. It's a testament to human ingenuity and our species' remarkable ability to adapt to new environments. The evolution of human clothing lice is one of the most fascinating detective stories in archaeology. Body lice are different from head lice. They live specifically in clothing rather than directly on the human body. By studying the genetic divergence between head lice and body lice, scientists determined when humans first started wearing clothes regularly enough to support a distinct population of clothing-dwelling parasites. The answer? Around 170,000 years ago, which coincides perfectly with when humans began migrating out of Africa into colder climates. Clothes weren't just fashion. They were survival technology that allowed our species to colonize the world. But let's get back to the daily reality of Stone Age fashion, which was less survival technology and more portable ecosystem of horrors. Imagine putting on a t-shirt and never taking it off. Not for sleeping, not for working, not for any activity whatsoever. Now imagine that this t-shirt is made from animal hide that was processed with methods that would violate every health code ever written. The hide was scraped clean with stone tools, treated with animal brains. Yes, brains. They contain natural tanning agents. Then left to cure in conditions that can charitably be described as outdoor and optimistic. The resulting garment was functional but far from pleasant. Stone Age leather was stiff, scratchy, and retained a persistent aroma that combined ode to dead animal with hints of the bodily fluids used in processing. It was also porous enough to allow air circulation, which sounds nice until you realize this meant every odor you produced was absorbed directly into the fabric, creating a personalized scent profile that grew stronger and more complex over time. And that was just the base layer of your aromatic experience. On top of your unwashed hide garments, you'd wear fur for warmth. These furs came from whatever animals you'd managed to kill, and the tanning process, if you could call it that, was rudimentary at best. The fur might be relatively fresh when you first put it on, but after months of wear, it developed its own distinct bouquet. Think wet dog, but worse. Much worse. The really fun part was the wildlife that came with your clothing. Every piece of Stone Age clothing was essentially a mobile apartment complex for parasites. Lice were the most obvious tenants. They lived in the seams and folds of fabric, laying eggs in the warm, dark spaces where clothing met skin. These weren't just occasional visitors. They were permanent residents with established territories and probably property rights. But lice were just the beginning. Fleas loved the organic materials and constant warmth of worn clothing. Mites burrowed into the fabric itself, creating tiny tunnels through the leather. Various beetles and their larvae found clothing an ideal breeding ground. Your outfit wasn't just something you wore. It was a thriving ecosystem that you carried around with you everywhere. The itching must have been constant and maddening. Imagine trying to hunt a mammoth while every square inch of your body felt like it was hosting a microscopic rave. Stone Age people developed an entire repertoire of scratching techniques, probably including specialized tools for reaching those hard-to-scratch areas where clothing met skin. Archaeological evidence suggests they weren't completely helpless against their parasitic roommates. Researchers have found combs made from bone and wood that were clearly designed for removing lice and other insects from hair and clothing. These weren't delicate grooming tools. They were robust, practical instruments designed for serious pest control. Some cultures developed techniques for temporarily reducing parasite populations. Smoking clothing over fires could drive out some insects, though it also added another layer of aromatic complexity to already fragrant garments. Hanging clothes in cold weather might freeze some parasites to death, providing temporary relief before the inevitable recolonization. But the most effective parasite control method was simply making new clothes. When your current outfit became so thoroughly infested that wearing it was more torture than protection, it was time for a wardrobe upgrade. This involved killing animals, processing hides, and crafting new garments, a process that could take weeks or months of work. The materials available for Stone Age clothing varied dramatically depending on location and season. In colder climates, people relied heavily on animal furs and hides. Mammoth fur was particularly prized for its warmth and durability, though mammoth hunting was essentially an extreme sport with a high mortality rate. More commonly, people used deer, bear, rabbit, and whatever other animals they could successfully kill. In warmer climates, or during summer months, plant-based materials became more important. Archaeological evidence from sites like Catalhoyuk shows that Stone Age people were remarkably innovative with plant fibers. They used everything from tree bark to grass to create primitive textiles. Oak bark, in particular, was popular because it could be processed into relatively soft, flexible fibers that were easier to work with than animal hides. The tools required for clothing production were surprisingly sophisticated. Stone Age people developed specialized scrapers for cleaning hides, bone awls for punching holes, and eventually bone needles with eyes for sewing. The invention of the eyed needle around 40,000 years ago was a revolutionary advancement that allowed for much more complex garment construction. These needles made it possible to create fitted clothing rather than just wrapping hides around the body. Suddenly, people could make sleeves, hoods, and other specialized features that provided better protection from the elements. Archaeological sites from this period show evidence of increasingly complex clothing designs, including what might have been the world's first underwear. Simple linen undergarments that provided an extra layer of protection and modesty. But even with these technological advances, the fundamental problem remained. There was no practical way to clean clothes. Modern laundry depends on abundant hot water, effective detergents, and mechanical agitation to remove dirt, oils, and odors. Stone Age people had none of these things. Water was too precious to waste on washing clothes, especially since the amounts needed would have been enormous. Heating enough water to actually clean a garment would have required substantial amounts of fuel and time, resources that were desperately needed for cooking, heating, and other survival activities. Even if they had wanted to wash their clothes, the garments themselves weren't designed for it. Leather and fur don't respond well to soaking. Getting them thoroughly wet could cause shrinkage, stiffening, or complete deterioration. The natural oils that kept the materials flexible would be washed away, leaving clothes that were brittle and uncomfortable. Instead of washing, Stone Age people developed maintenance techniques that focused on extending the life of their garments rather than keeping them clean. They might scrape off accumulated dirt and debris with stone tools, apply fresh animal oils to keep leather supple, or patch holes with pieces from other worn-out clothing. The social implications of unwashable clothing were significant. Since everyone's clothes were equally dirty and equally aromatic, clothing-based social distinctions had to come from other factors. The quality of materials, the complexity of construction, or the presence of decorative elements like beads, shells, or carved bone could indicate status, skill, or wealth. Some cultures developed elaborate decoration techniques that served multiple purposes. Painting designs on leather with natural pigments could hide stains and were patterns while also displaying artistic skill. Sewing shells, teeth, or other ornaments on a clothing created visual interest and might have helped mask some of the more obvious signs of long-term wear. The gender dynamics of Stone Age clothing are particularly interesting. Archaeological evidence suggests that women were primarily responsible for clothing production, from processing hides to sewing finished garments. This made sense from a practical standpoint. Pregnant and nursing women might have been less involved in hunting and could contribute to group survival through skilled textile work. But clothing wasn't just about practicality. Even in the harsh conditions of Stone Age life, people found ways to express personal style and cultural identity through their garments. Different groups developed distinctive styles of clothing decoration, construction techniques, and material preferences that served as visual markers of tribal affiliation. Children's clothing presents its own set of challenges. Kids grow quickly, so making elaborate, long-lasting clothing for them was impractical. Instead, Stone Age children probably wore simplified versions of adult clothing, often made from scraps and leftovers. As they outgrew their garments, the clothes would be passed down to younger children or repurposed into other useful items. The seasonal aspects of Stone Age clothing were crucial for survival. Summer garments needed to provide protection from sun and insects while allowing heat to escape. Winter clothing required maximum insulation while still allowing enough mobility for hunting and gathering. Many cultures probably had different outfits for different seasons, though different might just mean adding or removing layers of fur. Perhaps most remarkably, some Stone Age clothing was designed to last for years or even decades. The best preserved examples from archaeological sites show evidence of extensive repair and modification. Patches, restitching, and creative alterations suggest that people invested significant effort in maintaining their clothing for as long as possible. The transition from Stone Age to more advanced clothing technologies was gradual but transformative. The development of better tanning techniques, more sophisticated sewing tools, and eventually the invention of looms and weaving technology revolutionized human clothing. But it would be thousands of years before anyone figured out how to effectively clean clothes without destroying them. So the next time you complain about having nothing to wear while standing in front of a closet full of clean, well-maintained clothing, remember your Stone Age ancestors. They made it work with one outfit, stone tools, and a remarkable tolerance for discomfort. And they did it all while hosting a traveling circus of parasites that would have made a medieval plague, Dr. Weep, with professional envy. 5. Toilet troubles. Where did they go? Let's address the most pressing question about Stone Age life. And by pressing, we mean the kind of biological urgency that waits for no one, regardless of whether you're hunting mammoths or hiding from saber-toothed cats. Where exactly did Stone Age people go to the bathroom? The short answer is wherever they happened to be standing when nature called. The long answer involved a fascinating journey through humanity's evolving relationship with waste disposal, from the blissful simplicity of just walk away to the complex nightmare of, oh God, we live here now, and we can't just leave our poop everywhere. For the vast majority of human existence, our ancestors had the ultimate bathroom solution: the entire world. Need to relieve yourself? Pick a spot, do your business, walk away, and let Mother Nature handle the cleanup. It was a system so elegant in its simplicity that it worked perfectly for millions of years. No plumbing required, no maintenance necessary, no awkward small talk while waiting for a stall to open up. This approach worked beautifully for nomadic hunter-gatherers who were constantly on the move. By the time any waste had a chance to become a hygiene problem, the group had moved on to new territory, leaving their biological contributions to decompose peacefully and fertilize whatever plants were lucky enough to benefit from the deposit. Picture the scene. You're a Stone Age nomad following a herd of migrating caribou. When nature calls, you simply step away from the group, handle your business behind a convenient boulder or bush, and rejoin the hunt. The waste you leave behind will be scattered by wind, rain, and scavenging animals, broken down by bacteria and insects, and absorbed into the ecosystem without anyone ever having to think about it again. It was the perfect waste management system. Zero infrastructure, completely sustainable, and absolutely no ongoing maintenance requirements. Every other animal on the planet used the same approach, and it worked just fine for them too. But then humans had to go and ruin everything by inventing civilization. The problem started when people decided that staying in one place had certain advantages. Maybe it was near a reliable water source, or a good hunting ground, or just a particularly nice cave that nobody wanted to give up. Suddenly, the walk away and forget about it approach to waste disposal became significantly less appealing when away was still technically part of your neighborhood. Archaeological evidence suggests this transition happened gradually over thousands of years, but the basic problem was always the same. When you live in one place for extended periods, your waste accumulates. And accumulated human waste is not just unpleasant, it's genuinely dangerous. The earliest evidence of human waste management comes from sites like Skara Brae in Scotland, dating to around 3000 BCE. These Stone Age settlements show the first primitive attempts at organized sanitation. Archaeologists have found stone-lined channels that appear to have been early drainage systems, in small enclosed spaces that might have functioned as the world's first toilets. But let's be clear about what these early toilets actually were. We're not talking about porcelain bowls with comfortable seats and convenient flush handles. These were essentially holes in the ground, maybe lined with stones if you were feeling fancy, located in small stone chambers that offered minimal privacy and absolutely no ventilation. The user experience was probably less than stellar. Picture squatting over a stone-lined pit in a cramped, dark chamber that smells like the concentrated essence of everyone who ever used it before you. There's no toilet paper. That won't be invented for another few thousand years. No running water for cleanup. No soap for hand washing afterward, assuming you even understood why that might be important. The waste disposal process was equally primitive. In the best-case scenario, these early latrines were connected to drainage channels that carried waste away from living areas using gravity and whatever water was available. More commonly, they were just pits that gradually filled up until they became so obviously problematic that something had to be done about them. What something meant usually involved either digging a new pit and covering the old one, or the less pleasant option of emptying the existing pit by hand. There's limited archaeological evidence for how this was actually accomplished, but given the tools and techniques available, it was probably exactly as awful as you're imagining. The social dynamics of early toilet use were probably complex and fascinating. Who got to use the good latrines? Was there a hierarchy based on social status? Did families share facilities, or were they communal spaces for the entire settlement? How did people coordinate usage to avoid awkward encounters? These questions become even more interesting when you consider that privacy, as we understand it, probably didn't exist. Stone Age settlements were small, cramped communities where everyone knew everyone else's business, sometimes literally. The idea of personal privacy during bodily functions was likely a foreign concept. Children would have learned toilet habits through observation and imitation, just like every other aspect of Stone Age life. Picture a Stone Age parent explaining the finer points of pit latrine etiquette to their toddler. Remember, aim for the hole, not the surrounding area. And try not to fall in. We're not equipped for rescue operations. The gender dynamics of Stone Age toilet use were probably influenced by practical considerations rather than modesty. Pregnant women, for instance, might have needed assistance or special accommodations. Menstruation would have created additional hygiene challenges that required creative solutions with the limited materials available. But here's where things get really interesting. Some Stone Age groups never made the transition to fixed toilet facilities at all. Instead, they developed sophisticated systems for managing waste while maintaining their nomadic lifestyle. These groups understood that human waste, while problematic when concentrated, could actually be beneficial when properly distributed. They developed techniques for strategic waste placement that took advantage of natural decomposition processes while minimizing health risks to the group. Some cultures designated specific areas downwind and downstream from camps for waste disposal. Others developed rotation systems that moved waste sites regularly to prevent accumulation. The most sophisticated groups understood seasonal patterns and would time their movements to take advantage of natural cleaning processes like spring floods or seasonal die-offs of parasites and disease vectors. The tools available for personal hygiene after using these primitive facilities were limited and often improvised. Soft leaves were probably the most common toilet paper substitute, though the selection varied dramatically based on local vegetation. Some plants were softer and more absorbent than others, and experienced Stone Age people probably knew which leaves to avoid, either because they were too rough, too slippery, or had unpleasant chemical properties. Smooth stones might have served similar purposes, though the logistics of finding, carrying, and maintaining a personal collection of bathroom stones seems somewhat impractical for nomadic groups. More likely, people simply used whatever was conveniently available and hoped for the best. Water, when available, was used for cleanup, but this created its own problems. Using clean drinking water for sanitation was a luxury that most groups couldn't afford. Using contaminated water for cleaning could spread disease. The ideal solution was flowing water that could carry waste away while providing a renewable cleaning resource, but such ideal conditions weren't always available. The transition from nomadic waste management to settled sanitation created new categories of problems that humans had never faced before. Concentrated populations meant concentrated waste, which attracted scavengers, created odor problems, and increased the risk of disease transmission. Archaeological evidence from early settlements shows that humans experimented with various solutions to these problems. Some groups tried to manage waste through control burning, though this created air pollution and fire hazards. Others attempted composting techniques, though without understanding the underlying biological processes, results were inconsistent at best. The most successful early sanitation systems seem to have been those that took advantage of natural water flow to carry waste away from living areas. Settlements built near rivers or streams could use flowing water for waste disposal, though this created downstream problems for anyone else living along the waterway. Some groups developed the first versions of what we'd recognize as sewage systems, channels and ditches that use gravity and water flow to transport waste away from homes and into designated disposal areas. These systems required significant labor to construct and maintain, but they represented major advances in public health and quality of life. The social organization required for communal sanitation projects was probably significant. Building and maintaining drainage systems required coordinated labor, shared resources, and some form of governance to ensure everyone contributed to and benefited from the infrastructure. These early sanitation systems also created new categories of specialized knowledge and labor. Someone had to understand water flow, drainage, and waste management well enough to design effective systems. Someone had to organize the labor required for construction and maintenance. Someone had to enforce the social rules and hygiene practices that made communal sanitation work. The health implications of these developments were enormous. Those Stone Age people probably didn't understand the connections between sanitation and disease. Improved waste management would have reduced exposure to harmful bacteria and parasites, decreased contamination of water supplies, and generally made settlements healthier and more pleasant places to live. But these benefits came with costs. Fixed sanitation infrastructure tied communities to specific locations, making it harder to move in response to environmental changes or resource depletion. The labor and resources required for sanitation systems meant less time and energy available for other survival activities. The seasonal aspects of Stone Age waste management were probably crucial, but often overlooked. Winter conditions would have made outdoor latrine use particularly unpleasant and potentially dangerous. Frozen ground would have made digging new pits difficult or impossible. Snow and ice could have blocked drainage systems or made access to facilities treacherous. Summer brought different challenges. Higher temperatures accelerated decomposition and increased odors. Insect activity peaked, creating additional health hazards around waste sites. Drought conditions might have reduced water availability for cleaning and waste transport. Some groups probably developed seasonal variations in their waste management practices, using different techniques and locations depending on environmental conditions. The most sophisticated cultures might have had summer waste sites and winter alternatives, or seasonal modifications to their sanitation infrastructure. Perhaps most remarkably, some Stone Age waste management techniques were surprisingly effective by modern standards. Controlled composting, when properly managed, can safely break down human waste while producing useful fertilizer. Strategic site selection and rotation can minimize environmental impact while taking advantage of natural decomposition processes. The transition from Stone Age sanitation to more advanced systems was gradual but revolutionary. The development of better tools, improved understanding of hygiene and disease, and more sophisticated social organization gradually led to more effective waste management techniques. But it's worth remembering that some Stone Age approaches to sanitation were actually superior to what came later. The nomadic strategy of dispersal and natural decomposition was environmentally sustainable in ways that later concentrated urban sanitation systems were not. So the next time you're sitting comfortably in your climate-controlled bathroom with soft toilet paper, running water, and privacy that your Stone Age ancestors couldn't have imagined, take a moment to appreciate the infrastructure that makes it all possible. Your Stone Age ancestors managed their bathroom needs with holes in the ground, leaves for toilet paper, and the constant awareness that poor sanitation decisions could literally kill them. And somehow, against all odds, they managed to survive long enough to become your ancestors. 6. Dinner and death. Food safety Stone Age style. Welcome to Stone Age cuisine, where the dinner menu reads like a catalog of potential causes of death, and the phrase food safety would have gotten you the same blank stare as trying to explain cryptocurrency to a confused cave bear. Let's set the scene for a typical Stone Age meal. You've spent the better part of the day tracking a mammoth across frozen tundra, finally managing to bring down this walking mountain of meat through a combination of luck, desperation, and the kind of teamwork that emerges when everyone knows that failure means starvation. Now comes the fun part, turning several tons of dead mammoth into dinner without accidentally poisoning your entire tribe. No pressure. In a modern world, we've become so accustomed to food safety that we take it completely for granted. Our meat comes pre-butchered, wrapped in plastic, and labeled with expiration dates. Our vegetables are washed, sorted, and delivered to air-conditioned grocery stores. We have refrigeration, pasteurization, food safety inspectors, and enough government regulations to fill a small library. If something looks, smells, or tastes even slightly questionable, we throw it away and order pizza. Your Stone Age ancestors had none of these luxuries. Every meal was a calculated risk, a gamble between nutrition and potential death that they had to make multiple times every day for their entire lives. But here's the remarkable thing. Not only did they survive this culinary roulette, they actually developed surprisingly sophisticated food preparation techniques that would influence human cuisine for millennia to come. Recent archaeological discoveries have revolutionized our understanding of Stone Age cooking, revealing a level of culinary complexity that would impress modern chefs if they could get past the complete absence of hygiene standards. The earliest evidence of deliberate food preparation dates back an astonishing 70,000 years. Archaeologists analyzing charred food remains from caves in Greece and Iraq have found evidence that both Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens were creating complex dishes that involved multiple steps of preparation, careful seasoning with bitter and aromatic plants, and cooking techniques that required considerable skill and planning. These weren't just people throwing chunks of raw meat onto a fire and hoping for the best. They were grinding wild grains into flour, mixing ingredients into what can only be described as prehistoric bread, and combining plant and animal foods in ways that enhanced both nutrition and flavor. They were, quite literally, the world's first chefs. Of course, they were also working without any understanding of bacteria, parasites, or the basic principles of food safety that keep modern kitchens from becoming biological weapons laboratories. Let's start with the most fundamental challenge: keeping food from spoiling in an era before refrigeration, preservatives, or even basic understanding of what makes food go bad in the first place. Stone Age people lived in a world where every piece of food was in a constant race against decomposition. The moment an animal died, bacteria began breaking down the tissues. Plant foods started fermenting or rotting as soon as they were harvested. Without modern preservation techniques, most food had a shelf life measured in hours or days rather than weeks or months. The primary preservation technique was controlled drying, and Stone Age people became remarkably skilled at it. They understood that removing moisture from food dramatically slowed decomposition, even if they didn't understand why. Archaeological sites show evidence of sophisticated drying racks, smoking structures, and food storage areas designed to take advantage of air circulation and protection from moisture. But here's where things get interesting and slightly horrifying from a modern perspective. Stone Age people also developed extensive knowledge of controlled fermentation and what modern food safety experts would diplomatically call strategic putrefaction. Yes, you read that correctly. Our ancestors deliberately allowed food to rot, then ate it anyway. Before you recoil in horror, understand that this wasn't desperate hunger driving people to eat spoiled food. This was sophisticated food technology that took advantage of natural fermentation processes to preserve nutrients and create new flavors. Fermented fish, aged meat, and various forms of controlled food decomposition were staples of Stone Age cuisine in many regions. Ethnographic studies of modern hunter-gatherer cultures give us insights into how these techniques might have worked. Inuit peoples, for example, have traditional methods for fermenting fish and marine mammals that involve burying the food in specific conditions for weeks or months. The resulting product is highly nutritious, long-lasting, and perfectly safe to eat, despite smelling like something that died several weeks ago, which it essentially did. Stone Age people living in northern climates probably developed similar techniques. Archaeological evidence from Paleolithic sites includes storage pits that seem designed for controlled fermentation of fish and meat. These weren't accidental discoveries. They represent sophisticated understanding of how to manage decomposition processes to create food that was both preserved and safe to eat. The cooking process itself was where Stone Age food preparation became truly remarkable. Archaeological analysis of ancient hearths reveals cooking techniques that were far more complex than simple roasting over open flames. Stone Age cooks understood heat management in ways that would impress modern barbecue enthusiasts. They created different temperature zones within their fires, used various types of wood to generate different flavors and heat intensities, and developed techniques for slow cooking that could break down tough plant fibers and make meat more digestible. One of the most sophisticated techniques was stone boiling. Since they didn't have metal pots that could withstand direct flame, Stone Age cooks heated stones in fires until they were red hot, then carefully transferred these thermal bombs into water-filled containers made from animal stomachs or tightly woven baskets. This allowed them to cook stews, soups, and other liquid-based dishes with remarkable precision. The containers themselves were marvels of practical engineering. Animal stomachs, when properly prepared, made excellent cooking vessels that could hold water and withstand the thermal shock of hot stones. Baskets woven so tightly they could hold water represented hours of skilled labor and demonstrated remarkable understanding of materials and construction techniques. But stone boiling was just one of many cooking methods. Archaeological evidence shows that Stone Age people were also experts at pit cooking, where food was buried in specially prepared underground ovens lined with hot stones. This technique allowed for slow, even cooking that could make even the toughest roots and tubers palatable and digestible. They understood smoking not just as a preservation technique, but as a way to add flavor and create different textures. Different types of wood produced different smoke characteristics, and experienced Stone Age cooks probably had strong preferences for specific combinations of fuel and food. The ingredients available to Stone Age cooks varied dramatically by season and location, but archaeological evidence suggests they were remarkably creative with whatever was available. Plant foods included wild grains, nuts, roots, tubers, berries, and an enormous variety of leafy greens and herbs that modern people would find completely unfamiliar. Some of these plant foods were inherently dangerous. Wild almonds, for example, contained cyanide compounds that could be lethal if consumed in large quantities. But Stone Age people developed techniques for processing these potentially toxic foods to make them safe and nutritious. This involved complex procedures like repeated grinding, soaking, and cooking that could take days to complete properly. The sophistication of these detoxification techniques suggests that Stone Age people had detailed knowledge of plant chemistry and food safety that was passed down through generations. They understood which foods needed special processing, how to identify plants that were safe to eat, and how to prepare potentially dangerous ingredients without poisoning themselves. Animal foods presented their own set of challenges and opportunities. Large game animals like mammoths provided enormous amounts of meat, but they also created massive food safety problems. How do you safely process and preserve several tons of meat using Stone Age technology, especially when you're working in conditions that would horrify modern food safety inspectors? The answer involved community cooperation on a scale that's hard to imagine today. Entire tribes would mobilize to process large kills, with different groups responsible for different aspects of butchering, cooking, and preservation. This wasn't just practical necessity. It was social technology that ensured everyone benefited from successful hunts while minimizing the risk of food spoilage. Archaeological evidence from mammoth kill sites shows evidence of systematic butchering that maximized the use of every part of the animal. Nothing was wasted because waste was a luxury that Stone Age people couldn't afford. Bones were cracked open for marrow, organs were consumed fresh or preserved for later use, and even seemingly inedible parts were processed into useful materials for tools, clothing, or shelter. The timing of food consumption was crucial for safety. Fresh meat had to be eaten quickly before decomposition set in, while preserved foods could be saved for leaner times. Stone Age people developed sophisticated systems for managing these different categories of food, ensuring that their communities had access to nutrition even when hunting was unsuccessful or gathering opportunities were limited. But despite all this sophistication, Stone Age food preparation was still incredibly dangerous by modern standards. Without understanding of bacteria, parasites, or foodborne pathogens, people regularly consumed food that would send modern health inspectors into cardiac arrest. Raw meat consumption was common, partly out of necessity and partly because Stone Age people understood that cooking could destroy certain nutrients. Archaeological analysis of coprolites, fossilized feces, from Stone Age sites reveals evidence of various parasites and pathogens that were clearly transmitted through food consumption. Trichinosis from undercooked pork, tapeworms from raw meat, and various bacterial infections from contaminated food were probably regular parts of Stone Age life. People developed some resistance to these problems through constant exposure, but foodborne illness was undoubtedly a significant cause of death, especially among children and elderly individuals whose immune systems were less robust. The seasonal aspects of Stone Age food safety were particularly challenging. Winter storage required techniques that would preserve food for months without refrigeration. Summer heat accelerated decomposition and increased the risk of bacterial contamination. Spring and fall presented opportunities for gathering and hunting that had to be carefully managed to ensure adequate food supplies during leaner times. Some groups developed remarkably sophisticated storage techniques that took advantage of natural environmental conditions. Underground storage pits lined with stones and bark could maintain relatively stable temperatures year-round. Natural freezing in winter climates provided temporary refrigeration, though managing frozen food storage required understanding of freeze-thaw cycles and their effects on food quality. The social aspects of Stone Age food safety were probably as important as the technical aspects. Knowledge about food preparation, preservation, and safety was passed down through generations via oral tradition and hands-on experience. Elderly tribal members who had survived decades of Stone Age cuisine were walking encyclopedias of food safety knowledge. Though they probably couldn't have explained why certain practices worked, they just knew they did. Gender roles in food preparation were likely complex and varied between cultures, but archaeological evidence suggests that both men and women participated in different aspects of food production and processing. Men typically handled large game hunting and butchering, while women often specialized in plant food gathering and processing. But these weren't rigid categories. Survival required flexibility and cooperation from everyone. Children learned food safety through observation and participation, starting with simple tasks and gradually taking on more complex responsibilities. This experiential learning was crucial because mistakes in food preparation could literally be fatal. A child who learned to properly identify edible plants or correctly process potentially toxic foods was contributing directly to their family's survival. The tools available for Stone Age food preparation were surprisingly sophisticated, though they would look primitive by modern standards. Stone knives could be made razor-sharp and were excellent for precise cutting and butchering. Bone tools provided specialized implements for specific tasks like marrow extraction or hide processing. Wooden implements offered versatility and could be shaped for particular cooking or food processing needs. Perhaps most remarkably, Stone Age people developed techniques for food preparation that are still used today. Fermentation, smoking, and controlled drying are fundamental preservation methods that connect modern cuisines directly to Stone Age innovations. The sourdough starter in your refrigerator represents a food technology that Stone Age people would have recognized and understood. The nutritional sophistication of Stone Age diets is another area where modern research has challenged previous assumptions. Rather than barely surviving on whatever they could find, Stone Age people appear to have had detailed understanding of nutrition and dietary balance. They combined plant and animal foods in ways that provided complete amino acid profiles, essential fatty acids, and important vitamins and minerals. Archaeological analysis of Stone Age diets reveals consumption of an enormous variety of foods, far more diverse than typical modern diets. This diversity wasn't just about availability, it was about understanding that different foods provided different nutritional benefits. The variety also provided insurance against seasonal shortages and reduced the risk of nutritional deficiencies. But perhaps the most impressive aspect of Stone Age food safety was the simple fact that it worked well enough to keep our species alive and thriving for hundreds of thousands of years. Despite the constant risks, the lack of modern safety measures, and the genuine dangers of their food preparation techniques, Stone Age people successfully fed themselves and their children well enough to spread across the globe and eventually develop the technologies that would make their food safety struggles obsolete. So the next time you're worried about an expiration date or debating whether that leftover takeout is still safe to eat, remember your Stone Age ancestors. They turned mammoth hunting into meal planning, developed the world's first cuisine from whatever they could find, and somehow managed to feed themselves without killing themselves in the process. Most of the time, anyway, 7. Creepy crawly companions, parasites, and disease. Congratulations! You've just woken up in the Stone Age, and you're not alone. In fact, you're never alone. Ever. Because sharing your body with dozens of different species of parasites isn't just common in the Stone Age. It's essentially mandatory. Meet your new permanent roommates: head lice, body lice, pubic lice, fleas, mites, ticks, intestinal worms, and a colorful supporting cast of bacteria, fungi, and protozoa that have decided your body is prime real estate. They don't pay rent, they don't follow house rules, and they have absolutely no intention of moving out. Welcome to the most crowded living situation in human history. In the modern world, we think of parasites as medical emergencies. A single louse discovered in a child's hair triggers immediate action. Special shampoos, fine-tooth combs, washing everything in sight, and enough parental panic to fuel a small aircraft. The discovery of intestinal parasites sends people rushing to doctors for powerful medications that can eliminate the invaders within days. Your Stone Age ancestors lived with parasites the way modern people live with pets. They were just part of the family. Permanent, unwelcome, constantly reproducing parts of the family that made your life miserable, but weren't going anywhere no matter how much you complained about them. The archaeological evidence for Stone Age parasite infestations is both fascinating and deeply disturbing. When researchers examine ancient human remains, they don't just find bones and teeth. They find entire ecosystems of preserved parasites that tell the story of humanity's oldest and most persistent relationships. Coprolites, fossilized human feces, for those keeping track of technical terminology, from Stone Age sites read like catalogs of biological horror. Intestinal roundworms, whipworms, tapeworms, and various protozoan parasites are regular features in these ancient bathroom deposits. Some specimens contain so many different parasite species that researchers have wondered how the hosts managed to survive long enough to produce the evidence. But survive they did, and in remarkable numbers. The secret wasn't eliminating parasites. That was impossible with Stone Age technology. The secret was learning to coexist with them in ways that minimize the damage while maintaining enough health to hunt, gather, reproduce, and raise children who would inherit their own thriving parasite collections. Let's start with the most obvious and persistent Stone Age companions: lice. These tiny, wingless insects have been humanity's faithful followers for so long that their evolutionary history tells the story of human development. Body lice, specifically, are living archaeological evidence that reveals when humans first started wearing clothes regularly. Here's the remarkable detective story. Head lice and body lice are closely related but genetically distinct species. Body lice live in clothing rather than directly on human skin, which means they can only survive when humans wear clothes regularly enough to provide a stable habitat. By studying the genetic divergence between these two lice species, scientists determined that body lice evolved around 170,000 years ago, which means that's when humans began wearing clothes consistently enough to support a clothing-dependent parasite population. In other words, lice evolution is proof that humans have been dealing with clothing-related pest control problems for nearly 200,000 years. Your Stone Age ancestors weren't just wearing clothes. They were wearing clothes that were actively breeding insects. The daily reality of Stone Age lice infestation was probably constant, maddening itching. Imagine trying to track a mammoth herd while every square inch of your scalp and body feels like it's hosting a microscopic rave. Stone Age people developed entire repertoires of scratching techniques, probably including specialized tools for reaching those impossible-to-scratch spots where clothing seams met skin. Archaeological sites have yielded evidence of bone and wooden combs that were clearly designed for lice removal rather than hairstyling. These weren't delicate grooming instruments. They were robust, practical tools designed for serious pest control. The teeth were spaced precisely to catch adult lice and their eggs, and many show were patterns that suggest regular, vigorous use. But lice were just the beginning of the Stone Age parasite experience. Fleas were equally common and arguably more problematic. Unlike lice, which were content to live quietly in hair and clothing, fleas were mobile home invaders that could jump between hosts, spread rapidly through communities, and carry various diseases that could devastate entire populations. Archaeological evidence suggests that fleas were particularly problematic in settled communities where humans lived in close proximity to domestic animals. Dogs, which were among the first domesticated animals, brought their own flea populations into human settlements. These animal fleas could survive on human blood when necessary, creating multi-species flea communities that lived in the spaces where humans and animals shared shelter. The jumping ability of fleas made them nearly impossible to eliminate with Stone Age technology. Unlike lice, which could be caught and removed with careful combing, fleas could leap away from detection and return later to continue their blood-sucking activities. Stone Age people probably developed various techniques for flea control, smoking out sleeping areas, using aromatic plants that repelled insects, or simply accepting that flea bites were part of life. Ticks presented their own special category of horror. These arachnid parasites attached themselves to human skin and fed for days or weeks before dropping off, engorged with blood. Unlike modern people, who can remove ticks with tweezers and antiseptic, Stone Age people had to deal with tick attachments using whatever tools were available, probably sharp stone implements or fingernails. The real danger with ticks wasn't just the blood loss or the discomfort of having a parasitic arachnid attached to your skin. Ticks are vectors for numerous diseases, including what we now know as Lyme disease, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and various forms of encephalitis. Stone Age people had no understanding of disease transmission, so they probably didn't realize that the tick bite they'd received weeks earlier was connected to the fever, joint pain, and neurological symptoms they were experiencing. But perhaps the most significant parasite burden faced by Stone Age people was internal. Intestinal worms of various species that competed with their hosts for nutrients and caused a range of health problems from mild discomfort to serious malnutrition. Roundworms were probably the most common intestinal parasites. These large, white worms could grow to impressive lengths, sometimes over a foot long, and produce thousands of eggs that were shed in human feces. In communities without sophisticated waste management, these eggs could contaminate water supplies and food sources, ensuring continuous reinfection cycles that affected entire populations. The life cycle of roundworms was perfectly adapted to Stone Age living conditions. Eggs shed in human waste would develop in soil or water until they were accidentally consumed through contaminated food or water. Once inside their human host, they would mature into adult worms that fed on partially digested food in the intestines, competed with their host for nutrients, and produced new generations of eggs to continue the cycle. Archaeological analysis of Stone Age coprolites reveals roundworm infections that must have been severe enough to cause significant malnutrition. Some specimens contain so many roundworm eggs that researchers estimate the hosts were carrying dozens or possibly hundreds of adult worms simultaneously. Tapeworms presented an even more disturbing form of internal parasite. These segmented worms could grow to enormous lengths, sometimes over 30 feet, while living in human intestines. Unlike roundworms, which competed with their hosts for nutrients, tapeworms actually absorb nutrients directly through their skin, essentially stealing food from their host digestive systems. The most common tapeworm infections in Stone Age populations probably came from eating undercooked meat from infected animals. Without understanding of proper cooking temperatures or food safety, Stone Age people regularly consumed meat that contained tapeworm larvae. These larvae would develop into adult worms in the human intestine, where they could live for years while producing segments filled with eggs that were shed in human waste. Archaeological evidence suggests that some Stone Age communities had tapeworm infection rates approaching 100%. Every member of these communities was probably carrying at least one species of tapeworm, and many individuals were infected with multiple species simultaneously. Whipworms were another common intestinal parasite that caused chronic digestive problems and malnutrition. These worms attached themselves to the wall of the large intestine, where they fed on blood and tissue fluids while producing eggs that were shed in feces. Heavy whipworm infections could cause severe anemia, chronic diarrhea, and developmental problems in children. The geographical distribution of different parasite species tells fascinating stories about human migration and cultural practices. Certain parasites were endemic to specific regions, and their presence in archaeological remains can provide clues about ancient trade routes, population movements, and cultural exchanges. For example, schistosoma parasites, which cause schistosomiasis, were endemic to certain river systems in Africa and the Middle East. The presence of these parasites in human remains can indicate that populations were living near infected water sources or had recently migrated from endemic areas. The seasonal patterns of parasite infection were probably significant factors in Stone Age life. Many parasites have complex life cycles that depend on specific environmental conditions, seasonal availability of intermediate hosts, or particular behavioral patterns in their human hosts. Malaria, transmitted by mosquitoes, would have been a major problem in warm, humid climates where mosquito populations thrived. Stone Age people living in these areas would have faced seasonal malaria outbreaks that could devastate communities, particularly affecting children and pregnant women who had less resistance to the parasite. Archaeological evidence from some Stone Age sites suggests that communities developed behavioral adaptations to minimize parasite exposure. Settlement patterns, seasonal migration routes, and even architectural features might have been influenced by efforts to reduce contact with disease vectors or contaminated environments. Some Stone Age groups probably understood empirical connections between certain environmental conditions and disease outbreaks, even without understanding the underlying biological mechanisms. They might have avoided camping near stagnant water during mosquito season, or developed taboos around consuming certain animals that were frequently infected with parasites. The impact of parasites on Stone Age social structure was probably significant. Heavily infected individuals would have been less capable of contributing to hunting, gathering, and other survival activities. Children with severe parasite loads might have experienced developmental delays that affected their ability to learn essential skills. Pregnancy and childbirth were particularly vulnerable times for Stone Age women. Parasitic infections could cause anemia, malnutrition, and immune system suppression that increased the risks of pregnancy complications. Many parasites can be transmitted from mother to child during pregnancy or breastfeeding, ensuring that parasite infections began in infancy and continued throughout life. The archaeological evidence suggests that Stone Age people developed some treatments for parasitic infections, though these were probably based on empirical observation rather than scientific understanding. Certain medicinal plants have anti-parasitic properties, and some of these same plants appear in archaeological contexts that suggest deliberate use for health purposes. Birch polypore, a fungus found with Otzi the Iceman, has known anti-parasitic properties and might have been used to treat intestinal worm infections. Various aromatic plants found at Stone Age sites could have served as natural insect repellents or treatments for external parasites. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Stone Age parasite infections is how they shaped human evolution and immune system development. Constant exposure to parasites created strong selective pressure for immune system traits that could provide resistance or tolerance to chronic infection. Modern research suggests that some genetic variants that provide resistance to malaria, intestinal parasites, and other infectious diseases were selected for during the Stone Age period. The genetic diversity of human immune systems reflects hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary arms races between human hosts and their parasitic companions. The coevolutionary relationship between humans and parasites also influenced parasite evolution. Parasites that killed their hosts too quickly were evolutionary dead ends, while those that could maintain chronic infections without causing immediate death were more likely to be transmitted to new hosts. This created selective pressure for parasites that could coexist with their human hosts over long periods. Stone Age parasite loads probably had significant effects on human behavior and cultural development. Chronic infections could affect cognitive function, energy levels, and overall health in ways that influenced individual and group decision-making. Communities with high parasite burdens might have developed different social structures, work patterns, or cultural practices compared to healthier populations. The nutritional demands of supporting large parasite populations would have been significant. Infected individuals required more food to maintain their own health, while also feeding their internal parasites. This increased nutritional stress might have influenced hunting and gathering strategies, food sharing practices, and social hierarchies within Stone Age communities. Children growing up with chronic parasite infections face particular challenges. Intestinal parasites could interfere with nutrient absorption during critical developmental periods, potentially affecting growth, brain development, and immune system maturation. The effects of childhood parasite exposure might have had lifelong consequences for cognitive function and physical health. Yet despite these enormous challenges, Stone Age humans not only survived, but thrived well enough to spread across the globe and eventually develop the technologies that would make their parasite problems obsolete. The fact that our species survived hundreds of thousands of years of chronic parasite infection is a testament to human resilience and adaptive capability. The transition from Stone Age to more advanced parasite control happened gradually as humans developed better sanitation, food safety practices, and eventually medical treatments. But it wasn't until the modern era that humans finally gained the upper hand in their ancient struggle against parasitic companions. So the next time you're annoyed by a mosquito bite or worried about a suspicious-looking tick, remember your Stone Age ancestors. They lived their entire lives sharing their bodies with dozens of different parasite species, somehow managed to survive and reproduce despite chronic infections, and never once had access to insect repellent. And they did it all while maintaining the energy to hunt mammoths and invent civilization. Your ancestors were basically walking parasite hotels, and they still managed to become the most successful species on the planet. That's either incredibly impressive or deeply disturbing, depending on your perspective. 8. Grooming rituals. Looking good Stone Age style. Picture this. You're getting ready for the most important social event of the Stone Age calendar, the annual Mammoth Harvest celebration, where eligible bachelors and bachelorettes will gather to show off their hunting prowess, share fermented berries, and hopefully find someone whose body odor is compatible with their own. Time to get gorgeous. But this isn't modern grooming, where getting ready means a hot shower, clean clothes, and maybe some cologne. This is Stone Age beautification, where looking your best involves bone combs, stone razors, strategic application of animal fat, and the kind of personal grooming techniques that would make a modern spa therapist weep with professional horror. Welcome to prehistoric primping, where vanity meets survival, and the beauty industry consists entirely of whatever sharp objects and aromatic substances you can find lying around your cave. The popular image of Stone Age people suggests they were too busy surviving to care about appearance. We imagine hairy, unkempt cave dwellers who were more concerned with avoiding becoming saber-toothed tiger snacks than with looking attractive to potential mates. This assumption is both completely understandable and utterly wrong. Archaeological evidence reveals that Stone Age people were surprisingly sophisticated when it came to personal grooming and appearance. They weren't just randomly hairy. They were making deliberate choices about hairstyling, body decoration, and personal presentation that required considerable skill, planning, and effort. The earliest evidence of intentional grooming dates back an astonishing 30,000 years. Cave paintings from this period show human figures with carefully styled hair, suggesting that even our earliest artistic ancestors understood that appearance mattered enough to be worth documenting. These aren't crude stick figures. They're detailed representations of people who clearly spent time and effort on their personal presentation. But perhaps the most remarkable grooming discovery comes from bog preservation sites across northern Europe. Bog bodies, human remains preserved in acidic peat bogs, have provided unprecedented insights into Stone Age hair care and styling techniques. These naturally mummified individuals often retain their original hairstyles, offering direct evidence of grooming practices that would otherwise be lost to time. The most famous example is probably the Clonachavan man, discovered in Ireland, who lived around 2,300 years ago. His hair was styled in an elaborate mohawk-like arrangement and held in place with an early form of hair gel made from plant resin and pine oil. This wasn't just functional grooming. This was Stone Age haute couture that required sophisticated understanding of hair styling and cosmetic chemistry. Even more remarkably, analysis of the hair gel revealed that some of the ingredients had to be imported from hundreds of miles away. This suggests that looking good was important enough to justify significant trade relationships and resource expenditure. Stone Age people weren't just grooming themselves with whatever was locally available. They were creating international supply chains for beauty products. The tools available for Stone Age grooming were surprisingly sophisticated, though they would look primitive by modern standards. Bone combs dating back 5,000 years have been found at archaeological sites across Europe and Asia. These weren't crude implements. They were carefully crafted tools with evenly spaced teeth designed for specific grooming functions. Different types of combs served different purposes. Wide-toothed combs were used for detangling and general hair management. Fine-toothed combs were designed for removing lice and other parasites, essentially the world's first specialized pest control equipment. Some combs were decorated with intricate carvings, suggesting they served social and ceremonial functions in addition to practical grooming. Hair cutting required even more specialized tools. Stone Age people developed remarkably sharp cutting implements from flint, obsidian, and other materials. Obsidian blades, in particular, could be made sharper than modern surgical scalpels and were excellent for precise hair cutting and styling. Archaeological evidence from cave paintings and preserved bog bodies suggests that Stone Age people had sophisticated understanding of hair styling techniques. Braiding was particularly popular and practical. It kept long hair out of the way during work activities while also serving as a form of personal decoration. The complexity of some preserved Stone Age braids is genuinely impressive. Multi-strand braids, elaborate knots, and decorative hair arrangements that would challenge modern hairstylists have been found on bog bodies across Northern Europe. These hairstyles required considerable skill and probably significant time to create and maintain. But Stone Age grooming wasn't just about hair. Archaeological evidence reveals extensive use of body decoration, cosmetics, and what can only be described as prehistoric fashion accessories. Ochre, a natural iron oxide pigment that produces vivid red and yellow colors, was used for body painting across multiple continents and time periods. Ochre mining and trade was a major industry in the Stone Age world. Archaeological sites show evidence of ochre extraction, processing, and long-distance trade that suggests body decoration was important enough to justify significant economic activity. Some ochre mines show evidence of continuous use for thousands of years, indicating the demand for cosmetic pigments was both substantial and sustained. The application techniques for ochre body paint were sophisticated and varied. Some cultures mixed ochre with animal fats to create long-lasting body paints that wouldn't wash off easily. Others combined ochre with plant extracts to create different colors and textures. Archaeological analysis of ochre residues reveals evidence of complex preparation techniques that required detailed knowledge of chemistry and material science. Different colors and patterns of body paint probably served various social functions. Some designs might have indicated tribal affiliation, social status, or ceremonial roles. Others could have served practical purposes. Certain pigments might have provided protection from insects or sun exposure, while dramatic body painting could have been used for hunting camouflage or intimidation of enemies. The social aspects of Stone Age grooming were probably complex and fascinating. Archaeological evidence suggests that grooming was often a communal activity that strengthened social bonds and reinforced group hierarchies. Elaborate hairstyles and body decoration required assistance from other people, creating opportunities for social interaction and cooperation. Children probably learned grooming techniques through observation and practice, starting with simple tasks and gradually developing the skills needed for more complex styling and decoration. The knowledge required for effective grooming, which plants produced good dyes, how to make effective hair gels, which techniques worked best for different hair types, would have been passed down through generations via hands-on experience and oral tradition. Gender roles in Stone Age grooming were likely different from modern expectations, though the archaeological evidence is limited and sometimes contradictory. Some bog bodies show that both men and women engaged in elaborate hair, styling, and body decoration. However, certain grooming practices might have been gender-specific or associated with particular social roles. The famous Tallen Man, another bog body from Denmark, shows evidence of careful grooming and hair styling despite being male. His hair was cut in a specific pattern and his face was clean-shaven, suggesting that male grooming was sophisticated and deliberate rather than haphazard. Interestingly, some archaeological evidence suggests that Stone Age men might have been more concerned with personal grooming than women in certain contexts. Cave paintings often show men with no facial hair, while women are depicted with elaborate hairstyles and body decoration. This could reflect practical considerations. Hunters might have removed facial hair to prevent scents from alerting prey, while women's grooming might have focused more on social and ceremonial functions. The seasonal aspects of Stone Age grooming were probably significant. Winter conditions would have made elaborate body painting impractical, while summer offered opportunities for more complex decoration and styling. Seasonal availability of materials, certain plants for dyes, animal fats for cosmetics, or specific stones for tools, would have influenced grooming practices throughout the year. Some grooming practices might have been specifically timed to coincide with important social events. Archaeological evidence from some sites suggests that intensive grooming and body decoration were associated with ceremonial gatherings, trade meetings, or seasonal celebrations where multiple groups came together. The practical aspects of Stone Age grooming often overlapped with survival concerns in ways that modern people might find surprising. Hair styling wasn't just about appearance. It was about functionality. Long hair needed to be managed to prevent it from interfering with hunting, gathering, or other survival activities. Braiding served multiple practical purposes beyond aesthetics. Braided hair was less likely to get tangled in vegetation during travel, easier to keep clean, and less attractive to parasites than loose hair. Complex braids could also serve as storage systems. Small tools, ornaments, or other valuable items could be woven into elaborate hairstyles for safekeeping. Body decoration might have served practical functions that weren't immediately obvious. Certain pigments could provide protection from insects. Some ochre-based paints contain compounds that act as natural insect repellents. Other decorative substances might have had medicinal properties or provided protection from environmental hazards like sunburn or windburn. The scent control aspects of Stone Age grooming were probably crucial, especially for hunters. Natural human body odor could alert prey animals to approaching danger, making successful hunting extremely difficult. Stone Age hunters developed various techniques for minimizing or masking their scent, including strategic removal of body hair, application of aromatic substances, and careful management of clothing and equipment. Archaeological evidence suggests that some Stone Age groups understood the connection between personal scent and hunting success. Sites associated with hunter-gatherer cultures show evidence of aromatic plants that were probably used for scent control, along with tools and techniques for managing body hair and other sources of human odor. The tools used for scent control grooming were often the same implements used for other grooming purposes, but applied with different techniques and objectives. Stone scrapers could be used to remove body hair, while bone needles might have been used for extracting splinters or other debris that could create odors. Aromatic plant materials could be rubbed on skin or woven into clothing to provide natural deodorant effects. Stone Age people also developed sophisticated understanding of natural materials that could enhance their appearance and grooming routines. Various clays could be used for facial treatments or body decoration. Certain plant extracts could condition hair or provide natural hair styling products. Animal fats could be processed into primitive cosmetics that served both aesthetic and practical functions. The innovation and experimentation involved in Stone Age grooming was probably extensive. Without modern understanding of chemistry or dermatology, people had to discover through trial and error which materials and techniques produced desired results without causing harmful side effects. Some of these experiments probably ended badly. Imagine discovering through personal experience that certain plant extracts cause severe skin irritation, or that particular combinations of materials produce toxic reactions. The knowledge that survived to be passed down through generations represented successful experiments that had been tested and refined over time. The artistic aspects of Stone Age grooming should not be underestimated. Body decoration, hair styling, and personal ornamentation were forms of artistic expression that allowed individuals to display creativity, skill, and cultural knowledge. The most elaborate grooming practices probably required considerable artistic talent and aesthetic sensibility. Archaeological evidence from some sites suggests that certain individuals specialized in grooming and body decoration services for their communities. These early beauty professionals might have been responsible for creating elaborate ceremonial decorations, maintaining complex hairstyles, or providing specialized grooming services for important social events. The tools and materials associated with these grooming specialists show evidence of sophisticated understanding of their craft. Specialized applicators for body paint, complex mixing tools for cosmetic preparations, and elaborate storage systems for grooming materials suggest that Stone Age beauty services were serious professional activities. The evolution of Stone Age grooming practices probably reflected broader changes in human social organization and cultural complexity. As communities became larger and more sophisticated, grooming practices likely became more elaborate and specialized. Increased trade and cultural exchange would have introduced new materials, techniques, and aesthetic concepts that influenced local grooming traditions. The development of better tools and technologies would have expanded the possibilities for grooming and body decoration. Improved cutting implements allowed for more precise hair styling. Better containers and processing techniques enabled more complex cosmetic preparations. Enhanced trade networks provided access to exotic materials that could create new and impressive decorative effects. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Stone Age grooming is how it demonstrates that human vanity and aesthetic sensibility are fundamental aspects of our species. Even under the most challenging survival conditions, humans found time and resources to invest in personal appearance and grooming. This wasn't frivolous behavior. It was sophisticated social technology that served multiple functions simultaneously. Grooming reinforced social bonds, displayed individual status and capabilities, enhanced attractiveness to potential mates, and provided practical benefits for survival activities. The fact that Stone Age people developed complex grooming practices without modern tools, materials, or knowledge suggests that the desire to look good and feel attractive is deeply embedded in human nature. Our ancestors were willing to invest significant time, effort, and resources in personal appearance, even when their survival was never guaranteed. So the next time you're spending an hour getting ready for a night out, remember your Stone Age ancestors. They managed to look fabulous using bone combs, stone razors, and pigments they had to mine and process themselves. And they did it all without mirrors, professional stylists, or even the most basic understanding of hygiene. Your morning routine is luxury beyond their wildest dreams, but their dedication to looking good would put most modern beauty influencers to shame. 9. Survival of the cleanest, health and life expectancy. Let's talk about your life expectancy in the Stone Age. And by life expectancy, we mean the statistical probability that you'll survive long enough to see your children grow up, assuming you're lucky enough to survive childhood yourself, which is a pretty big assumption. The harsh reality is this. If you're reading this and you're over the age of 40, congratulations. You've already outlived the vast majority of all humans who ever existed. You've achieved something that would have made you a statistical miracle, a walking wonder, the equivalent of a unicorn in Stone Age society. In the Stone Age, reaching the ripe old age of 30 meant you were officially elderly. Hitting 40 made you practically ancient, a walking repository of wisdom, survival knowledge, and probably more parasites than anyone really wanted to think about. If you somehow managed to survive to 50, you were essentially a living legend, the human equivalent of a really old tree that everyone gathered around to marvel at and wonder how it hadn't fallen over yet. The average life expectancy for Stone Age humans hovered around 30 to 35 years, but that number is misleading in ways that would make a modern statistician weep. It's not that everyone died conveniently at age 30. It's that so many people died so young that they dragged the average down into the basement of human longevity. The real killer wasn't old age, disease, or even the obvious dangers of hunting mammoths with pointed sticks. The real killer was being born at all. Infant mortality in the Stone Age was catastrophic by modern standards. Archaeological evidence suggests that somewhere between 40% and 60% of all children died before reaching their 5th birthday. Think about that for a moment. In a typical Stone Age family with 4 children, 2 of them wouldn't live to see kindergarten if kindergarten had existed, which it definitely didn't. The causes of childhood death were as varied as they were tragic. Infections that modern antibiotics cure in days could kill Stone Age children in weeks. Diarrheal diseases from contaminated water or food were frequently fatal. Respiratory infections, common in communities living in smoke-filled caves, could easily progress to pneumonia and death. Even minor injuries could become infected and lethal without proper medical care. But here's where it gets really interesting from hygiene perspective. The children who survived this biological gauntlet were the ones whose immune systems had successfully adapted to the appalling sanitary conditions of Stone Age life. They were the genetic lottery winners who could tolerate constant parasite infestations, survive regular exposure to contaminated food and water, and maintain enough health to grow and thrive despite living in conditions that would hospitalize modern humans within days. The adults you'd encounter in a Stone Age community were essentially the Navy SEALs of immune system function. They represented the small percentage of the population whose bodies had successfully negotiated decades of biological warfare against bacteria, parasites, viruses, and all the other microscopic entities that viewed human bodies as convenient real estate. These survivors bore the physical evidence of their struggles. Archaeological examination of Stone Age skeletons reveals bodies that tell stories of constant combat against infection, injury, and malnutrition. Bones show evidence of repeated healing from fractures, signs of chronic infections, and the kind of wear patterns that come from decades of physically demanding survival activities. Their teeth, when present, were often worn down to nubs from chewing gritty, tough food. Dental abscesses were common and frequently fatal. A simple toothache could easily progress to sepsis and death without modern antibiotics. The lucky ones lost their infected teeth before the infection could spread. The unlucky ones died from complications that modern emergency rooms treat as minor inconveniences. Arthritis was practically universal among Stone Age adults. Joints that had endured decades of heavy lifting, long-distance walking, and sleeping on unforgiving surfaces developed the kind of chronic pain that would send modern people running for prescription medications. But Stone Age people had to hunt, gather, and work through joint pain that would be considered disabling today. Infectious diseases were the constant background noise of Stone Age life. Without understanding of germ theory, vaccination, or antibiotics, every minor cut or scrape was a potential death sentence. A small wound that became infected could progress to sepsis within days. Broken bones that pierced the skin almost inevitably led to fatal infections. The hygiene-related diseases were particularly brutal. Dysentery from contaminated water could kill through dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. Parasitic infections could cause chronic anemia that left people vulnerable to other diseases. Respiratory infections thrived in the smoke-filled, poorly ventilated spaces where Stone Age people sought shelter. But perhaps most remarkably, the Stone Age people who survived to adulthood had developed immune systems that were in some way superior to our modern versions. Constant exposure to pathogens had trained their immune systems to recognize and respond to threats that would overwhelm people raised in sterile environments. Archaeological analysis of ancient DNA reveals immune system adaptations that developed specifically in response to Stone Age living conditions. Genetic variants that provided resistance to malaria, intestinal parasites, and bacterial infections became more common in populations that faced these challenges regularly. The survivors were literally genetically selected for their ability to tolerate appalling hygiene conditions. This created a fascinating paradox. Stone Age people were simultaneously more disease-resistant and more disease-burdened than modern humans. They could survive chronic parasite infestations that would hospitalize modern people, but they also died from simple infections that we treat with over-the-counter medications. The gender differences in Stone Age survival were significant and often surprising. Women faced additional health risks related to childbirth, which was one of the leading causes of death for women of reproductive age. Without sterile conditions, skilled medical assistance, or understanding of obstetric complications, giving birth was essentially a life-or-death gamble that women had to take repeatedly if they wanted to contribute to their community's genetic future. Archaeological evidence suggests that many Stone Age women died in their teens or 20s during or shortly after childbirth. The survivors were often those who had successfully navigated multiple pregnancies and deliveries, suggesting that experience and possibly genetic factors played important roles in maternal survival. Men faced different but equally deadly risks. Hunting large and dangerous animals was essentially an extreme sport with no safety equipment and no emergency medical services. Archaeological sites contain skeletal remains showing evidence of trauma that clearly resulted from encounters with large predators or prey animals. Broken bones, puncture wounds, and evidence of severe blood loss tell stories of hunting expeditions that went very, very wrong. The seasonal patterns of Stone Age mortality were probably significant, but difficult to document archaeologically. Winter would have been particularly deadly for vulnerable populations, children, elderly individuals, and anyone already weakened by disease or injury. Food shortages, exposure to cold, and increased susceptibility to respiratory infections probably created annual mortality spikes that communities had to plan for and survive. Summer brought different challenges. Higher temperatures accelerated bacterial growth and food spoilage, increasing the risk of foodborne illnesses. Insect-borne diseases peaked during warm months when mosquitoes, ticks, and other disease vectors were most active. Dehydration became a serious risk during extended periods of hot weather, especially for communities with limited access to clean water. The nutritional aspects of Stone Age health were complex and often contradictory. When food was abundant, Stone Age people probably ate more diverse and nutritious diets than many modern people. Archaeological analysis of Stone Age remains reveals consumption of an enormous variety of plant and animal foods that provided excellent nutrition when available. But food security was never guaranteed. Seasonal shortages, failed hunts, and environmental changes could quickly lead to malnutrition that weakened immune systems and increased susceptibility to disease. Children were particularly vulnerable to nutritional deficiencies that could cause permanent developmental problems or death. The social aspects of Stone Age health and survival were crucial but often overlooked. Communities that could effectively care for sick and injured members probably had higher survival rates than groups that couldn't afford to support non-productive individuals. But the calculations were harsh. Resources spent caring for someone who might not recover were resources that couldn't be used for hunting, gathering, or caring for healthier community members. Archaeological evidence suggests that some Stone Age communities did invest in caring for disabled or injured individuals. Skeletons showing evidence of healed fractures, chronic illnesses, or disabilities that would have prevented normal survival activities indicate that these people received care and support from their communities long enough to survive and heal. But other evidence suggests that abandonment of sick or injured individuals was also common. The harsh realities of Stone Age life meant that communities sometimes had to make brutal decisions about resource allocation and survival priorities. The knowledge systems that developed around Stone Age health and survival were sophisticated but limited by the available technology and understanding. Communities developed extensive knowledge of medicinal plants, wound care, and basic medical procedures, but they lacked understanding of the underlying biological mechanisms that cause disease and death. Some Stone Age medical practices were surprisingly effective. Archaeological evidence suggests they understood how to set broken bones, treat wounds, and use various plants for pain relief and infection control. The famous case of trepanation, deliberately drilling holes in skulls, shows that some communities were willing to attempt sophisticated surgical procedures despite the obvious risks. But other Stone Age medical practices were probably ineffective or actively harmful. Without understanding of infection control, many treatments probably introduced additional pathogens while attempting to cure existing problems. Folk medicine based on observation and tradition sometimes worked, but it also sometimes killed people who might have survived without intervention. The psychological aspects of Stone Age health and survival were probably significant but difficult to study archaeologically. Living with constant threat of death, chronic pain, and witnessing the frequent deaths of family and community members would have created psychological stresses that modern people can barely imagine. Yet archaeological evidence suggests that Stone Age communities found ways to maintain social cohesion, cultural traditions, and even artistic expression despite these enormous challenges. Cave paintings, carved artifacts, and evidence of ceremonial activities indicate that people found meaning and purpose even in the face of harsh living conditions and short life expectancies. The evolutionary implications of Stone Age survival patterns were enormous. The genetic variants that survive in modern human populations were largely selected during this period of extreme environmental pressure. Our immune systems, metabolic processes, and even behavioral tendencies were shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of survival challenges that tested every aspect of human biology and psychology. Modern human health problems often reflect mismatches between our Stone Age-adapted biology and modern living conditions. Our immune systems evolved to fight constant infections, but now sometimes attack harmless substances, causing allergies and autoimmune diseases. Our metabolisms evolved to survive periods of feast and famine, but now struggle with constant food availability and sedentary lifestyles. The transition from Stone Age to more advanced medical care happened gradually over thousands of years, but the basic challenges remained similar until very recently in human history. Even as humans developed better tools, more sophisticated social organizations, and improved understanding of health and disease, life expectancy remained low and infant mortality remained high until the advent of modern medicine and sanitation. The remarkable thing about Stone Age survival isn't that it was difficult. It's that enough people survived it to populate the entire planet and eventually develop the technologies that would make their struggles obsolete. The fact that you exist today means that every single one of your ancestors, going back hundreds of thousands of years, successfully survived childhood, avoided fatal diseases, found enough food, escaped predators, survived accidents, and lived long enough to reproduce. You are the product of an unbroken chain of successful survivors stretching back to the very beginning of human existence. Every generation faced challenges that would terrify modern people, and every generation found ways to overcome those challenges long enough to pass their genes on to the next generation. The next time you're worried about a cold, stressed about a minor injury, or complaining about feeling unwell, remember your Stone Age ancestors. They survived decades of chronic parasite infestations, constant exposure to dangerous pathogens, regular food shortages, and medical care that consisted mainly of hoping for the best. And they did it all while maintaining enough health and energy to hunt mammoths, raise children, create art, and build the foundations of human civilization. Your ancestors were basically walking medical miracles, and the fact that you exist proves that sometimes, against all odds, the tough really do survive. 10. Conclusion. Thank your lucky stars for modern plumbing. So here we are, at the end of our aromatic journey through 50,000 years of spectacularly poor hygiene. You've survived the Stone Age, at least intellectually, and you're probably feeling one of two things. Either profound gratitude for the miracle of modern sanitation, or a desperate need to take the longest, hottest shower of your life. Both reactions are entirely appropriate. Let's take a moment to appreciate what you've just experienced. You've walked in the fur-lined, permanently damp footsteps of your ancestors through an era when personal hygiene was an oxymoron, food safety was a gambling addiction, and bathroom privacy was a concept so foreign it might as well have been quantum physics explained to a confused mastodon. You've learned that your Stone Age ancestors performed dental surgery with stone knives, lived in clothing that doubled as apartment complexes for insects, and managed waste disposal using the sophisticated, wherever you happen to be standing method. You've discovered that they developed surprisingly complex cooking techniques, while simultaneously eating things that would violate every health code ever written, and that they created elaborate grooming routines using tools that would make modern beauty professionals weep with professional horror. And through it all, they not only survived, they thrived well enough to spread across the entire planet, develop language, create art, invent tools, and eventually become us. This isn't just a story about how terrible Stone Age hygiene was, though it definitely was terrible by any reasonable modern standard. This is a story about human resilience, creativity, and the remarkable ability of our species to adapt to conditions that would challenge the survival skills of any other organism on Earth. Your Stone Age ancestors were living biological experiments in extreme adaptation. Every day, they faced hygiene-related challenges that would send modern humans running for the nearest emergency room. Chronic parasite infestations that would hospitalize contemporary people were just Tuesday for them. Dental problems that we treat with routine procedures were life-threatening medical emergencies that they handled with whatever sharp rocks happened to be available. Food that would close down restaurants and trigger government investigations was their daily bread, assuming they had bread, which they probably didn't, at least not the kind you'd recognize. Water that would fail every modern safety standard was the only water they had access to, and they had to make it work or die trying. But here's the truly remarkable thing. They figured it out. Not all at once, not easily, and certainly not without enormous costs and human suffering and early death. But gradually, over hundreds of thousands of years, they developed techniques and technologies that allowed them to survive and eventually thrive in conditions that would challenge the adaptability of any species. They learned which plants could be used for medicine and which ones would kill you. They developed food preparation techniques that maximize nutrition while minimizing the risk of immediate poisoning. They created tools for grooming and hygiene that served multiple functions simultaneously. They built the first sanitation systems and waste management techniques that would eventually evolve into the infrastructure we depend on today. Most importantly, they developed social systems and cultural knowledge that allowed communities to survive challenges that would have killed individuals. The elderly Stone Age woman who knew which berries were safe to eat wasn't just a repository of botanical knowledge. She was a living library of survival information that meant the difference between life and death for her entire community. The skilled Stone Age toolmaker who could create razor-sharp cutting implements from raw stone wasn't just a craftsperson. He was a technology developer whose innovations could improve the health, safety, and survival prospects of everyone around him. The experienced Stone Age mother who knew how to treat infections, set broken bones, and deliver babies safely wasn't just practicing folk medicine. She was serving as the entire healthcare system for her community, using knowledge passed down through generations of trial and error, success, and tragedy. These weren't primitive people stumbling around in ignorance. These were sophisticated humans who developed complex solutions to extraordinary challenges using the limited materials and knowledge available to them. They were our ancestors, and they were brilliant in ways that we're only beginning to understand and appreciate. The hygiene revolution that separated Stone Age life from modern life didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process that took thousands of years and countless innovations, most of which built on knowledge and techniques that Stone Age people had already developed. The discovery of soap, for instance, built on Stone Age understanding of how certain materials could be used for cleaning. The development of plumbing systems evolved from Stone Age techniques for managing water and waste. Modern food safety practices grew from Stone Age knowledge of which foods were safe to eat and how to prepare them properly. Even modern medicine, with all its sophisticated technology and scientific understanding, still relies on principles that Stone Age people discovered through experience. Many of our most effective medications are derived from plants that Stone Age communities knew had healing properties. Surgical techniques that we consider advanced often follow procedures that Stone Age practitioners developed using stone tools and whatever anesthetic plants they could find. The difference isn't that we're smarter than our Stone Age ancestors. It's that we've had thousands of additional years to build on their discoveries, plus the luxury of writing systems that allow us to preserve and transmit knowledge across generations without relying entirely on oral tradition. But let's be honest about what we've gained and what we might have lost in the transition from Stone Age to modern hygiene practices. On the positive side, we've obviously gained enormous improvements in health, life expectancy, and quality of life. The infant mortality rates that killed half of all Stone Age children are now rare tragedies rather than expected realities. Diseases that routinely killed Stone Age adults are now easily treatable with medications that are so common we take them for granted. We can drink water from taps without worrying about parasites or bacterial infections. We can eat food that has been processed, packaged, and stored using techniques that ensure safety and extend shelf life far beyond what Stone Age people could have imagined. We can maintain personal cleanliness with hot showers, effective soaps, and cleaning products that would seem like magic to our ancestors. We have access to dental care that can fix problems that would have been agonizing and eventually fatal for Stone Age people. We have clothing that can be washed and maintained easily, keeping us clean and comfortable without the constant presence of parasitic roommates. We have waste management systems that safely dispose of human waste without contaminating our living spaces or water supplies. We have medical care that can treat injuries and illnesses that would have meant certain death in the Stone Age. But we've also lost some things that our Stone Age ancestors possessed. Their immune systems, adapted to constant challenge, were in some ways more robust than our modern versions. Their diverse diets, when food was available, provided nutrition that many modern people struggle to achieve despite having access to foods from around the world. Their physical fitness, developed through daily survival activities, was often superior to what most modern people achieve, even with dedicated exercise programs. Their intimate knowledge of natural materials and processes allowed them to create solutions using only what was available in their immediate environment. Their social systems, built around community survival and mutual dependence, created bonds and cooperation that modern individualistic societies sometimes struggle to maintain. Perhaps most importantly, they possessed a kind of resilience and adaptability that comes from facing genuine survival challenges on a daily basis. They knew they could survive almost anything because they had already survived almost everything. Modern humans, for all our technological advantages, sometimes struggle with challenges that would have been minor inconveniences for our Stone Age ancestors. We've traded resilience for comfort, adaptability for specialization, and community dependence for individual autonomy. This isn't necessarily a bad trade. Modern life offers opportunities for health, education, creativity, and personal development that would have been impossible in the Stone Age. But it's worth recognizing what we've gained and what we've given up in the process. The hygiene practices we've developed also come with their own costs and complications. Our obsession with cleanliness sometimes creates problems that our ancestors never faced. Overuse of antibiotics has led to resistant bacterial strains that pose new kinds of health threats. Excessive sanitization can weaken immune systems that evolve to handle constant microbial challenges. Our food safety systems, while generally effective, have created dependencies on industrial processes and global supply chains that can be fragile and vulnerable to disruption. Our waste management systems, while sanitary, often simply move problems from one location to another rather than truly solving them. Modern hygiene practices require enormous amounts of energy, water, and resources that aren't available to much of the world's population. The infrastructure that supports our cleanliness, water treatment plants, sewage systems, soap factories, hospitals, represents enormous investments of materials and labor that must be constantly maintained and updated. None of this means we should return to Stone Age hygiene practices. The improvements in human health and quality of life that have resulted from modern sanitation are undeniable and invaluable. But it does mean we should appreciate both the costs and benefits of our current approach to cleanliness and health. It also means we should remember that the fundamental human needs that drove Stone Age hygiene innovations, staying healthy, managing waste, maintaining social bonds, and adapting to environmental challenges, are still with us today. We've developed more sophisticated tools and techniques for meeting these needs, but the underlying challenges remain fundamentally similar. Climate change, resource scarcity, population growth, and environmental degradation are creating new versions of the survival challenges that our Stone Age ancestors faced. The resilience, creativity, and adaptability that allowed them to survive and thrive under difficult conditions are qualities we may need to redevelop as we face the challenges of the future. The social cooperation and community knowledge sharing that were essential for Stone Age survival are still essential today, even if the specific knowledge and challenges have changed. The innovative problem-solving and resourceful use of available materials that characterize Stone Age technology are still valuable skills in a world facing environmental and resource constraints. Perhaps most importantly, the perspective that comes from understanding how our ancestors lived can help us appreciate what we have while also preparing for what we might face. Knowing that humans survived and thrived for hundreds of thousands of years under conditions far more challenging than anything we're likely to encounter can provide both humility and confidence as we navigate our own challenges. So the next time you turn on a tap and clean water flows out, remember that you're experiencing something that would have seemed like magic to 99% of all humans who ever lived. When you take a hot shower, appreciate that you're enjoying a luxury that kings and emperors of previous eras couldn't have imagined. When you brush your teeth with fluoride toothpaste, remember your Stone Age ancestors who performed dental surgery on themselves using stone knives. When you put on clean clothes, think about people who wore the same outfit for years while hosting entire ecosystems of parasites. When you use a toilet with running water and toilet paper, spare a thought for people who manage their waste disposal using the wherever you happen to be method. When you eat food that has been safely processed, packaged, and stored, appreciate the vast infrastructure that makes it possible. When you visit a doctor for routine health care, remember people who treated serious injuries and illnesses using medicinal plants, stone tools, and desperate hope. But also remember that those Stone Age people weren't helpless victims of their circumstances. They were innovative, resourceful humans who figured out how to survive and thrive under extraordinary challenging conditions. They were our ancestors, and their genes, their adaptations, and their accumulated knowledge made our existence possible. You carry within you the genetic legacy of successful Stone Age survivors. Your immune system, your metabolism, your ability to adapt to challenges, and your capacity for learning and problem-solving all reflect hundreds of thousands of years of selection for survival under difficult conditions. You are the descendant of people who survived constant parasite infestations, chronic food insecurity, predator attacks, infectious diseases, extreme weather, and all the other challenges of Stone Age life. You are the product of an unbroken chain of survivors stretching back to the very beginning of human existence. That's not just a remarkable heritage. It's also a reminder of what humans can accomplish when we have to. Your Stone Age ancestors prove that our species has the capacity to adapt, innovate, and survive under almost any conditions. So yes, absolutely thank your lucky stars for modern plumbing, antibiotics, soap, and all the other miracles of contemporary hygiene. But also remember that you come from a long line of people who made it work without any of those things. And if they could survive the Stone Age, you can probably handle whatever challenges come your way. Just maybe keep some hand sanitizer handy, just in case.